Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. I never thought it would happen. Not in a million years. We were supposed to be fine, stable. That's what he always told me. But then, one ordinary afternoon, I opened the mailbox to find a letter that would change everything. It was from the bank. I knew something was wrong when I saw the words "foreclosure notice" staring back at me. I felt my heart drop to my stomach. Foreclosed? I whispered aloud, reading the letter over and over again, hoping it was some mistake. But no, it was real. Our home, the place we'd built together, the place where we raised our children, was being taken from us. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what was happening. This couldn't be true. My husband had always told me everything was fine financially. He'd reassured me countless times that we were on solid ground. Yet here it was, a letter from the bank threatening to take away everything. I went to find him. He was in the kitchen, making coffee like it was just another day. His face was calm, but something in his eyes shifted when he saw the letter in my hand. He looked away, avoiding my gaze. I held out the paper, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why didn't you tell me about this? Why didn't you say anything?" His eyes were filled with guilt, and for a moment, he didn't say anything. His silence spoke louder than any words he could have used. He seemed to shrink in front of me, as if the weight of his secret was finally too much to bear. I didn't want to worry you," he muttered. But how could he not have told me? How could he have kept something like this from me for so long? I'd asked him about our finances before, more than once, and he'd always brushed it off, telling me everything was fine. "Don't worry about it," he'd say. "We're good." But now, here we were. I felt my world shifting beneath me. How much did I really know about our life together? The more I tried to understand what was happening, the more confused I became. My husband had always been the rock of our relationship, the stable, dependable one. He handled the bills, the mortgage, everything. I trusted him completely. But now, standing in our kitchen, holding the foreclosure notice, I felt betrayed. The trust one had in him, the trust we built our marriage on, was shattered. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How could you hide this from me?" He looked away again, his hands shaking. "It's not as bad as it looks," he said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. It was as if he was trying to convince himself more than me. I needed answers. I demanded to know what had happened, how we had ended up here. But all he gave me were vague answers and half-truths. He told me about a loan he'd taken out for the business, about some missed payments, about investments that didn't pan out, but none of it explained the mountain of debt that had accumulated in secret. As I began to dig deeper, I uncovered more hidden accounts, more unpaid bills. There were credit cards I didn't know existed, loans that had been pushed off for months, maybe even years. How could he have kept all of this from me? Why hadn't he been honest? I wasn't some stranger. This was my life, our life, and I had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. The weight of it all hit me like a ton of bricks. Every time I thought I had a grasp on the situation, something else would come to light. It was like he had built an entire life of lies around me, and I had been living in the dark. And now, as everything came crashing down, I had to face the truth. I didn't really know my husband at all. As the days passed, I found myself obsessing over the details of our finances, tracking down every transaction, every loan, every credit card bill. Each discovery felt like a punch to the gut. How had I not seen the signs? How had I been so blind to what was happening right under my nose? I sat with my husband night after night, going over the numbers. But every time I tried to get him to open up, to explain how we had ended up here, he would change the subject or shut down completely. He refused to acknowledge the full extent of our situation, as if by pretending it didn't exist, it would somehow go away. The lies kept piling up. I found out that he had been borrowing money from friends and family to cover up late payments, masking the truth behind a facade of normalcy. I discovered a second mortgage on the house that he had never mentioned. The money he had been making from his business wasn't enough to keep up with the debt, and he had been scrambling to cover the gaps. But instead of asking for help or confiding in me, he had hidden everything. I felt like a fool. How could he have lied to me for so long? How could he have kept me in the dark, even as our lives were crumbling around us? Every time I tried to confront him, the conversation would end in tears, in silence, in more empty promises. He would tell me he was going to fix everything, that he'd make it right, but I didn't know if I could believe him anymore. I had spent so many years trusting him, depending on him, believing in our future. But now, it felt like everything was slipping through my fingers. The house, the life we'd built, it was all slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. As the days passed, I began to feel a sense of urgency. Our home was on the line, and the clock was ticking. The auction date for our house was drawing nearer, and with it, the realization that we might lose everything. I spent sleepless nights, searching for solutions, calling lawyers, and trying to figure out how we could stop this from happening. My husband, however, was oddly calm. It was as if he had already accepted what was coming. He kept assuring me that we would find a way out, that it would all be fine in the end. But I couldn't understand how he could be so nonchalant. Didn't he realize how much was at stake? Didn't he see the desperation in my eyes? I couldn't just sit back and let this happen. I had to take control. I started researching options, short sales, refinancing, anything that could help us keep the house. But every option seemed to lead to a dead end. The debt was too much, the bank was too far gone. I could feel the walls closing in around me. I begged my husband to talk to me honestly, to lay everything out on the table. But every time I asked, he would dodge the question. He wouldn't tell me how much we owed or where the money had gone. And it was becoming clear to me that there was something he wasn't telling me. Something huge. I confronted him one night, tears streaming down my face. I need you to be honest with me. If we're going to fix this, we need to face it together. But he just stared at me, guilt written all over his face. And that's when I realized the truth was bigger than I could ever imagine. The night before the auction, everything came to a head. We sat in silence, the weight of the situation hanging over us like a dark cloud. My husband, the man I had trusted with everything, was sitting next to me, but I felt more alone than ever. The house, the life we had built, was about to slip away, and I didn't know how to stop it. Why didn't you tell me? I asked him again, my voice breaking. Why didn't you trust me enough to be honest with me? He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the raw fear in his eyes. I didn't want to hurt you, he whispered. I thought I could fix it before it ever got this far. I didn't want you to feel the burden of it. We worked hard to rebuild our lives, piece by piece. My husband was doing everything he could to pay down the debt, working long hours at his business, cutting out unnecessary spending. There were days when it felt like the weight of it all was too much, but he never gave up. And I, for my part, learned to lean into my own strength. I found a job, even though it meant starting from scratch, and I made sure our children didn't feel the brunt of our situation. We lived simply, but we lived with intention. Still, the shadows of our past loomed large. The memories of our home, of the lies, of the uncertainty, often crept into my thoughts. But every time they did, I reminded myself that we were making progress. One day, I could look back at this time and say, we survived it. We learned from it. And we're stronger because of it. As the months went by, my husband began to show me a side of him that I hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. He admitted the extent of his mistakes, the fear he had carried when he had first started hiding the debt from me. The shame had eaten at him for so long, and only now, as we were picking up the pieces, could he fully admit what had happened. It was hard to hear, but it helped me understand the burden he had been carrying. In many ways, this new life was better than the one we had before. It wasn't easy, but we were honest with each other now. We communicated more openly, without fear of judgment or hiding things. We knew that if we wanted to move forward, we had to trust each other fully. And that, more than anything, became the foundation of our new beginning. We had no illusions that things would be perfect from here on out. The debt was still there, and the scars of our past were not easily erased. But we had something else: hope. A small, flickering light that refused to go out, no matter how many setbacks we faced. My husband's business was slowly starting to recover, but it wasn't enough yet to make up for the damage. We had to live with the consequences of his mistakes, and there were days when I wished things were different. But then I would remember how far we had come. From the brink of losing everything to this, a chance to rebuild, however slowly. I tried to focus on the positives. Our kids were thriving, despite everything that had happened. They had their moments of confusion, asking why we didn't have the house anymore, but we made sure they understood that family was what mattered most. We spent more time together than we ever had before, cooking meals, playing games, and talking more openly than ever. It wasn't perfect, but we were a family, and that was enough. We took it one step at a time, learning to budget more carefully, to live within our means. I didn't mind the sacrifices. In fact, I started to appreciate the simple things. The small victories, paying off a bill, saving up for something we needed, watching our financial situation improve little by little, gave me hope that we could make it through this, no matter how long it took. There were days when I thought we'd never get back to the life we had before, and maybe we wouldn't. But that didn't mean we couldn't create a new one. We learned how to be grateful for what we had, instead of focusing on what we had lost. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't about regaining the house or the lifestyle we had before. No, the real question was whether we could rebuild our relationship, whether we could find a way back to each other after everything that had happened. I spent a lot of time reflecting on that. Could I forgive him fully? Could I trust him again? The answers didn't come easily. There were times when I felt like everything was falling apart again, when the doubts crept back in. But then I'd remember the man sitting across from me, working tirelessly to make things right, trying to show me he was still the person I fell in love with. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, moments when the past threatened to tear us apart, but we kept pushing through. We made a conscious decision to move forward, together. We didn't know what the future would hold, but we knew we wanted to face it as a team. The future was uncertain, but we had each other, and maybe that was enough. It wasn't easy to let go of the anger, to stop looking back and blaming him for what had happened. But I realized that holding on to it only kept me stuck in the past. And I didn't want to live in the past anymore. I wanted to move forward, to see what the future could hold for us, together. And so we did. We took one step at a time, trusting that each day would bring us closer to the healing we both needed. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was progress. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. As the weeks turned into months, I began to see a transformation. Not just in our financial situation, but in our relationship as well. My husband was working harder than ever to pay off the debt, but more importantly, he was showing up for me in ways he hadn't before. He was talking to me more openly, making an effort to rebuild the trust that had been broken. And little by little, I started to feel it again. The connection, the love, the partnership we once had. There were still moments when I questioned if we'd truly be able to rebuild. But as I watched my husband, I saw a man who was determined to make things right. He had learned from his mistakes, and he wasn't giving up. And neither was I. We had come so far, and I knew that if we kept working at it, we would make it through. One evening, as we sat down to a simple dinner, just the two of us, our kids asleep upstairs, I looked across the table at him. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic moment, but in that quiet, ordinary moment, I knew something had changed. We had made it through the storm. We had rebuilt, not just our finances, but our relationship. And while it wasn't perfect, it was ours. And that was enough. It wasn't just about recovering what we had lost. It was about growing stronger from the experience. Together, we learned to appreciate the things that really mattered. The love, the trust, the partnership. Our financial struggles had brought us to the edge, but they had also taught us valuable lessons. We couldn't control the past, but we could shape our future. And so, we kept moving forward, one day at a time. With the lessons learned and the love rebuilt, we faced the future with hope. There would always be challenges ahead, but we knew we could face them together. We were no longer the couple we had once been, but in many ways we were better, more honest, more resilient, more aware of what truly mattered. Our journey had been difficult, but it had also been a journey of redemption. And as we looked toward the future, we knew that no matter what came our way, we could face it, as long as we faced it together. The dust had settled. Life had found a rhythm again, though it was a much different rhythm than before. I no longer felt like I was constantly holding my breath, waiting for something else to go wrong. Sure, there were still financial struggles, and we weren't where we used to be. But we had something more important now, a sense of peace. That peace didn't come easily, and it wasn't permanent. Life has a funny way of testing you when you least expect it, but for the first time in a long while, I felt grounded. My husband and I had worked hard to rebuild, not just our finances but our emotional connection. The weight of the past wasn't gone, but it no longer dictated our every move. The evenings were still the hardest. Sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the past few years in my mind. How had it all gone so wrong? How had I not seen it coming? But then I'd remind myself that I couldn't change the past. I could only shape the present. And the present was better. We were better. We had learned how to talk about the hard things. My husband had learned to be more open, more honest. He didn't hide things from me anymore. Not the small things, not the big things. He knew now that silence and secrets didn't protect us. They only tore us apart. And though it had taken the destruction of our home to get us here, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the transformation. It was a quiet gratitude, born of hard lessons and painful growth. We were still rebuilding, always, but we had each other, and we had learned how to rebuild together. It wasn't just my husband who had changed. I had too. The woman who had stood in the middle of our empty house, devastated by the betrayal, was no longer the same person. I had taken responsibility for my part in our journey as well. I hadn't been perfect, and I had made my mistakes too. I had ignored warning signs. I had been blinded by the promises of a perfect life. But no one can live in denial forever. I had seen the truth, finally, and in doing so, I had accepted my own role in what had happened. I had been so focused on our dreams and our future that I had missed the cracks that were starting to form beneath the surface. It was humbling, this realization, but it was also freeing. I didn't need to blame myself for everything, but I did need to acknowledge where I had fallen short, and that acceptance gave me the strength to move forward. My husband and I had both carried the weight of our choices. He had hidden the debt, and I had ignored the warning signs. But we were facing it together now. We were taking responsibility for the parts we had played in this story. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. We talked more openly about our fears, our worries, and our dreams. No more secrets. No more pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. And that honesty, painful as it was, became the foundation of our relationship. Healing isn't a straight line. It's not a simple path from point A to point B. It's messy, winding, full of setbacks and false starts. But every step, no matter how small, brought us closer to a place of true healing. There were moments when I still felt betrayed. Moments when the weight of everything that had happened came crashing down on me all over again. It was hard not to feel angry when I remembered how close we had come to losing everything. And yet, somehow, I found a way to push those feelings aside. I reminded myself that anger, as justified as it might have been, wouldn't help us move forward. It would only hold us in place. We needed to heal, together. We needed to rebuild, not just our finances, but our trust, our connection, and our love. My husband had shown me, time and time again, that he was committed to making things right. And in turn, I had to show him that I was willing to trust him again. It wasn't easy, but we took it one day at a time. In the quiet of our new life, I could see how far we had come. The days of chaos, of uncertainty, seemed like a distant memory. We still had challenges to face, but we had learned how to face them together. As the months turned into a year, we started to talk about the future again. It wasn't just about paying down the debt or rebuilding our savings anymore. It was about our dreams. For a long time, I had buried my dreams under the weight of our financial struggles. I had told myself that they didn't matter, that we couldn't afford them, that they were too far out of reach. But slowly, I began to realize that just because we had lost everything didn't mean we couldn't rebuild our hopes as well. We started making plans. Maybe we couldn't buy a house again right away, but we could dream about one day doing so. Maybe we couldn't go on extravagant vacations, but we could take small trips to places we had always wanted to visit. Maybe we had to start over, but that didn't mean we couldn't create a new version of the life we had imagined. My husband was on board, too. We were no longer focused solely on survival. We were focused on creating a life we could be proud of, one step at a time. For the first time in years, I felt excited about the future. It was uncertain, yes, but it was ours. We were building it together. As time passed, the pain of losing our home faded, replaced by the satisfaction of rebuilding our lives, piece by piece. There were no grand gestures, no sudden moments of revelation, just a steady, quiet growth. We had become different people, stronger and more resilient, more aware of the fragility of life and the importance of love and trust. We weren't perfect. There would always be challenges, always be moments when the past would try to resurface. But we had learned how to face those challenges together. We had lost so much, but in the end, we had gained something far more valuable. A renewed sense of purpose, a stronger connection, and a love that had been tested but not broken. As we continued on this new path, I began to realize just how important our family was to us. The financial struggles we'd faced had tested our bond, but they also revealed something we had been taking for granted before: how much we truly relied on each other. It wasn't the house or the material possessions that mattered anymore. It was the people we loved. We spent more time together than ever before. The small apartment we now lived in felt a little cramped, but it was full of laughter, conversations, and moments of genuine connection. My husband and I no longer argued over money the way we once did. We had learned to communicate, to compromise, and to support each other. In many ways, our relationship had been reborn from the ashes of our past mistakes. And as for our children, we made sure they knew that our love was the foundation of our family, not the things we owned. There were no lavish vacations or birthday parties like before, but we found joy in the simple things: movie nights at home, family picnics, and long walks in the park. The bonds we formed in those moments were stronger than anything money could buy. The lessons we had learned through hardship were the lessons we passed on to our kids. They saw the strength it took to rebuild, to forgive, to keep going even when everything seemed uncertain. And that was the legacy we were creating now, one built on love, trust, and resilience. Some days were harder than others. It wasn't always easy to push through the lingering doubts or the moments of anger. There were times when the weight of everything we had lost threatened to overshadow the progress we had made. But I found a way to push through those moments by finding gratitude. Gratitude for the things that were still in our control. Gratitude for the strength we had found in each other. Gratitude for the chance to start again. It wasn't perfect, but we were together, and that was more than I had thought possible during the darkest days. Every day, I made a conscious decision to look for the good in our lives, even when it seemed small or insignificant. I started a journal, writing down 3 things I was grateful for each day. It helped me shift my focus from the things we lacked to the things we had. And the more I did it, the more I realized just how much we had. We had our health. We had our love. We had each other. And in the grand scheme of things, those were the things that truly mattered. It was one quiet afternoon, months after the foreclosure, when I realized something profound. I had spent so much time focusing on what we had lost that I had neglected to see how far we had come. I was sitting in our small kitchen, sipping a cup of tea, when I noticed my husband walking into the room. There was no grand gesture, no speech, but as he smiled at me, I saw a man who had truly changed. A man who had taken responsibility for his mistakes and worked tirelessly to make things right. He wasn't the same person who had hidden the debt from me. He had learned from his mistakes, just as I had learned from mine. And in that moment, I realized that I had forgiven him completely, not just with my words, but with my heart. The past no longer held the same power over me. We were no longer defined by our mistakes or our failures. We had found something more powerful: redemption. And it wasn't just about forgiving him. It was about forgiving myself. The clarity that came with that realization was freeing. It allowed me to embrace the future with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. We were still rebuilding, still facing challenges, but we were doing it together. And that made all the difference. As we continued to move forward, I began to see our family in a new light. We were resilient, stronger than we had ever been. We had faced the unimaginable and survived. And the most important lesson we had learned was that resilience wasn't just about surviving the storms. It was about how you grew in the aftermath. We had learned to be flexible, to bend without breaking. We had learned that life doesn't always go according to plan, but that doesn't mean it's the end. It just means you have to find a new way forward. In our case, that new way forward was filled with hope, with gratitude, and with a deep appreciation for the love that had carried us through. We weren't perfect, and we still had obstacles to face, but we were no longer afraid of them. We knew we could overcome anything. Together, that strength, that resilience, was the most valuable thing we had gained through everything we'd been through. It was something no one could take away from us. As time went on, we began to redefine what success meant to us. It wasn't about the house, the cars, or the material things we had once focused on. It wasn't about wealth or status. Success, we realized, was about how we showed up for each other, how we loved, how we supported one another through the challenges of life. We had gone from living in a beautiful home to losing everything, but in the process, we had gained something far more valuable, a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. The lessons we had learned through hardship about honesty, trust, responsibility, and love were the true measure of success. We began to focus on the things that brought us joy, no matter how small. We spent more time with our children, teaching them the values that had helped us survive. We laughed more, worried less, and made sure to celebrate the small victories. In many ways, we had everything we needed, not in the way we had once envisioned, but in a way that felt truer, deeper. Our success was no longer tied to the things we owned, but to the love we shared and the family we had built. The future, once filled with uncertainty and fear, now felt full of possibility. We had faced the worst and come out stronger. We had rebuilt our lives, our relationship, and our family. And while we knew challenges would continue to come our way, we no longer feared them. With each passing day, we learned to embrace the future. We made new plans, set new goals, and focused on the life we wanted to create moving forward. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about building something new, a future we could be proud of, together. In the end, the journey we had been through was the very thing that had shaped us into who we were now. And while it hadn't been easy, it had brought us closer, closer to each other, and closer to the kind of life we truly wanted. One filled with love, trust, and resilience. As the years passed, I often found myself reflecting on the lessons we had learned, the most important being the power of perspective. The hardship we had endured had forced us to change how we viewed the world, and most importantly, how we viewed ourselves. We had been through hell and come out the other side, not as the same people, but as stronger versions of who we once were. I had learned not to take anything for granted. The things that once seemed important, status, material wealth, the perfect life, had lost their hold on me. They no longer held the power to define my happiness. What mattered now was the ability to love, to forgive, and to find joy in the everyday moments. For my husband, the journey had been even more profound. He had spent so many years hiding his mistakes, living in fear of being found out. But now, he was a man who had learned to face his fears, who had embraced vulnerability and honesty. He was no longer the man who had kept secrets from me. He was the man who had opened up, who had fought to rebuild not just our finances but our entire life. And for both of us, that shift in perspective was a gift. We could now look at each day with gratitude, no matter how difficult it was, because we knew how precious it was to have each other. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was ours. As we moved forward, we began to think about the future in a different way. We weren't just thinking about ourselves anymore. We were thinking about the legacy we would leave behind. Our children were growing older, and we wanted them to understand the true meaning of success, not the kind that could be measured in dollars or possessions, but the kind that was built on love, integrity, and perseverance. We began to teach them about resilience, about the importance of facing challenges head-on, and about the value of honesty in relationships. We told them our story, not to make them feel sorry for us, but to show them that even when life knocks you down, you can always get back up. That's the true measure of success. How you rise, how you keep going, no matter the obstacles. We wanted to be the kind of parents who led by example, who didn't just talk about values but lived them every day. We spent more time with them, listened to their dreams, and encouraged them to pursue what they loved. Our past had shaped us into the parents we were now, and we were determined to give them a foundation of love and strength they could build on. Life after the foreclosure was never entirely free of stress. We had our ups and downs, and the weight of the past still sometimes crept into our minds. But one thing we had learned was how to find balance. We didn't let the pressures of money, success, or the past overwhelm us the way we once had. We focused on what we could control. We learned to manage our finances more wisely, to live within our means, and to plan for the future without obsessing over it. We knew there would be challenges ahead, but we also knew that we had the tools to handle them. The key was balance. Balance between work and family, between responsibility and enjoyment, between saving for the future and living in the present. We had come to realize that while success was important, it wasn't the only thing that mattered. Time spent with the people you loved, moments of laughter, and the peace that came from knowing you were doing your best. Those were the true markers of a fulfilling life. We learned to stop chasing after perfection and instead embraced the beautiful mess of life. And in that, we found peace. As our lives continued to unfold, I found myself reflecting often on the importance of trust. It had been shattered, broken beyond repair at one point, but it had been rebuilt painstakingly over time. Trust was the foundation upon which everything else was built. The love, the communication, the understanding. It was hard-earned, but it was worth it. My husband and I had spent years rebuilding our relationship, and the key to that rebuild was trust. It wasn't just about him proving himself to me. It was about both of us learning to trust ourselves, to trust each other, and to trust that we could face anything together. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the past tried to creep in and make us question everything. But each time that happened, we fought to keep moving forward. We knew that without trust, nothing else would matter. And so we worked on it every day, through open conversations, through shared goals, and through the simple act of showing up for one another. We had learned the hard way that life is unpredictable. There are no guarantees, no promises of smooth sailing. But what we did have was purpose. We had a renewed sense of purpose in our lives, a commitment to not just survive but to thrive, no matter the circumstances. We didn't need the big house or the fancy vacations anymore. What mattered was how we lived each day, with intention, with love, and with the knowledge that every small act of kindness, every moment of connection, was a piece of the larger story we were writing together. I had learned that purpose isn't found in things. It's found in the way you show up for others, the way you live your life with integrity, and the way you face challenges with courage. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with who I was, with who we were as a family. The past would always be a part of us, but it no longer defined us. We had created a new story, one that was built on love, on lessons learned, and on the power of resilience. The years following our rebuilding process felt different. I no longer measured my success by material standards, and neither did my husband. We'd learned that freedom wasn't about having everything. It was about having peace with where you were, with who you were. Our lives, though far from perfect, felt free in a way they never had before. We found ourselves laughing more, living more. Even the simple things, like making a home-cooked dinner or enjoying a walk in the park, felt profound. I'd stopped stressing about the things we didn't have and started appreciating the things we did. And in the process, I found a kind of liberation I had never imagined possible. Freedom came in the form of honesty, of not having to hide the truth, of not living under the constant weight of secrets. It wasn't about escaping our past. It was about letting it go, finding peace with it, and using it as fuel for the present. The emotional debt we had once carried had been forgiven, and what we were left with was clarity and freedom to chart a new course. It's funny how time works. The moments that once seemed so overwhelming, so insurmountable, begin to fade into the distance as new chapters are written. I looked at my husband one evening as we sat together on the couch, watching our children play, and realized how far we had come. What we'd experienced had shaped us, yes, but it hadn't defined us. We weren't the same people who had faced foreclosure, financial ruin, and the heartbreak of betrayal. We were something better, something stronger. We had survived the storm and come out the other side not just intact, but with a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. That night, we sat down together as a family and celebrated. Celebrated our journey, our growth, and the fact that we had made it through. We had endured the hard times, yes, but we had also found joy in the journey. It wasn't the life we'd envisioned, but it was the one we had made, and it was ours. It had been years since the foreclosure, But there were moments when the events of those early days still surfaced in unexpected ways. I'd be washing dishes or folding laundry, and suddenly, a memory would hit me. Of those dark days, the fear, the hopelessness. But now, those memories no longer hurt. They were simply a reminder of how much we had overcome. What surprised me most, though, was that I didn't resent those years anymore. I had once been consumed by anger and disappointment, but with time, I had come to see them differently. They had been a catalyst for change, a painful but necessary step in our evolution. Without those struggles, we wouldn't be the people we were today. In some strange way, I could even say I was grateful for the lessons those years had taught me. I had learned to appreciate the small moments, to value love over possessions, and to cherish the people who stood by me no matter what. It was an unexpected blessing, one I had never thought I would experience. But now, I understood that the hardships we faced had ultimately led us to a deeper, more meaningful existence. And for that, I was thankful. One of the most beautiful things about life is the opportunity to start over, to reinvent yourself, and to give second chances, both to others and to yourself. We had been given that chance, and we had made the most of it. The past had not been easy, but it had led us here, to a place of greater understanding, of deeper love, and of a stronger bond than we had ever known. I had given my husband a second chance, and in return, he had worked tirelessly to earn my trust again. But I had also given myself a second chance. I had forgiven myself for not seeing the warning signs, for allowing the financial lies to fester for so long. I had made peace with the mistakes I had made, and in doing so, I had found the strength to move forward. We had learned the value of second chances not only in relationships, but in life itself. We weren't perfect, and we would make more mistakes in the future. But we knew now that mistakes didn't define us. It was what we did afterward, how we grew, how we learned, that mattered. At some point along the way, I had stopped looking over my shoulder at the past. I no longer measured each day against the fears and regrets that had haunted me for so long. Instead, I started to embrace the present, the here and now. It was a quiet victory, but it was mine. Life wasn't about what we had lost or what we might gain. It was about how we chose to live each day, to find beauty in the ordinary moments. The love my husband and I shared, the laughter of our children, the simple act of being together. It was all I needed. We had learned to let go of the pressure to be perfect, to measure our worth by external standards. The house, the car, the bank account, it all seemed so small compared to the joy we found in the present. And that was enough. Our journey had brought us here, to a place of peace. It was a peace we had fought for, a peace we had earned. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly content, not because everything was perfect, but because I had learned to embrace life as it was, flawed, messy, but beautiful all the same. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset with my husband by my side, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. We had faced challenges that most people couldn't even imagine, and yet here we were, together, stronger than ever. We had built a life, not one defined by wealth or status, but by love, by resilience, and by the unwavering commitment to each other. Our children were growing into strong, compassionate individuals, and we knew that the legacy we were leaving behind wasn't about the things we owned, but about the values we had instilled in them. We had learned that true success was about how we treated others, how we faced adversity, and how we loved, unconditionally and without reservation. Our journey hadn't been easy, but it had shaped us into the family we were today, and that was enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I took my husband's hand and smiled. We had weathered the storm. We had come through it stronger, closer, and more in love than ever before. And that, in the end, was the greatest success of all. It felt surreal, standing at the edge of a new chapter. It was a chapter we never expected to write, filled with unexpected twists and turns, heartache and triumph. But it was our story, one that had taken us from the depths of despair to a place of healing, hope, and love. We had come full circle, back to a place of peace, of love, and of a future filled with possibilities. We knew that life would always bring challenges, but we also knew we were stronger now, equipped to handle whatever came our way. And as I looked around at the family we had built, the life we had created. I realized that we had everything we needed. We had each other, and that was enough. The journey had been long, but it had been worth every step. And as we walked forward, hand in hand, into whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. We would face it together, and that made all the difference. There's a beauty and simplicity that I hadn't appreciated before all of this. In the past, I had thought happiness was tied to big milestones. The new car, the house with the perfect view, the luxurious vacations. But now, I realized it wasn't those things that made life worth living. It was the moments in between. The quiet mornings spent sipping coffee together, the impromptu dance parties with the kids, the laughter that echoed through our small home. My husband and I had learned to cherish the little things. We didn't need grand gestures anymore. A handwritten note on the kitchen counter, a hug in passing, a smile across the room. These simple acts of love were enough to sustain us. Our new life had brought us back to basics, and in that, we had found the kind of happiness that couldn't be bought or measured by anything external. Sometimes, as we sat together watching the sun set or shared a quiet evening in front of the fireplace, I would think back to the frantic days before the foreclosure, when I was chasing after a version of happiness that always seemed just out of reach. Now, I understood that happiness wasn't a destination. It was the journey, and it was right here, in the present. Forgiveness had always seemed like an abstract concept to me before. It was something you read about in books, something you try to practice but often struggled with. Yet, through everything we had been through, I learned the profound power of forgiveness. It wasn't just about letting go of resentment toward my husband for hiding the debt. It was about freeing myself from the chains of anger and hurt that had held me hostage for so long. The act of forgiving didn't mean forgetting or excusing the past. It meant releasing the grip those painful memories had on me. It was about choosing to move forward, to heal, and to rebuild with an open heart. And once I did, I found peace that I hadn't known was possible. It wasn't just about forgiving him either. It was about forgiving myself for not seeing the signs, for allowing my own fears and insecurities to hold me back from confronting the truth sooner. I had to forgive myself for not being the perfect partner, the perfect protector. And once I did, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a freedom I had never expected. As we navigated life in this new chapter, my husband and I started to dream again. We had spent so much time just surviving, getting through the foreclosure, rebuilding our finances, repairing our relationship, that we had forgotten to dream of the future. But now, with time and healing behind us, we began to think about what we truly wanted out of life. Our dreams were different now, not driven by the need for status or wealth, but by a desire for fulfillment and peace. We talked about starting a small business, about giving back to our community, about traveling and seeing the world with our children. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time in a long time, we weren't afraid to pursue them. It was a beautiful shift. The dreams we once had were anchored in external validation. The dreams we now held were grounded in what we wanted for our family, for ourselves. They were about creating a legacy, not one built on material wealth, but on love, purpose, and the impact we could have on the world. We began to set goals, small and big, and started working toward them together. It felt like we were rediscovering ourselves, not just as a couple, but as individuals with hopes and aspirations of our own. Another unexpected blessing came in the form of our growing family. Over the years, we had gone from two people trying to keep it all together to a family of four, and each of our children brought a new layer of joy and purpose to our lives. The love we shared didn't just fill the house, it filled our hearts. We had learned so much about what it means to be parents, not from the pages of parenting books or Instagram influencers, but from our own experiences. We were far from perfect, but we were present, we were real, and we were determined to give our children the best version of ourselves. Watching them grow, hearing their dreams, and seeing them learn from our own struggles made me more grateful than ever. I could only hope that our journey would serve as a lesson to them, that life isn't about avoiding hardship, but about how you face it, learn from it, and move forward with love and determination. Our children were the legacy we were building, and I felt an overwhelming sense of pride in the family we had created. Their laughter, their curiosity, and their sense of wonder filled our home with a kind of richness that no amount of money could provide. When I look back now at the story of our lives, it feels like a novel with many chapters, some sad, some triumphant, some filled with uncertainty and fear. But in the end, it's our story, and it's one I'm proud of. We've come so far since the days of foreclosure, since the days when our world felt like it was crumbling around us. But we didn't crumble. We rebuilt. Our life wasn't just rewritten, it was reimagined. We took the pieces of our past, the mistakes, the lessons, and we used them to build something better, something stronger, something filled with love, honesty, and a deeper understanding of what truly matters. I used to wonder how it would feel to look back on those dark days of struggle. Would it still hurt? Would it still sting? But now, looking back, I see them for what they were. A catalyst for change, a turning point that led us to this beautiful, imperfect life we now have. And I wouldn't change a thing. I often wonder how I would have reacted if someone had told me, back then, that everything would turn out okay, that the foreclosure, the secrets, the pain, would one day lead us to a place of healing and peace. I would have been skeptical, unsure if it was even possible to find peace after everything we had been through. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, I know that it wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of something new. A future built on honesty, love, and a commitment to one another. There's no fear now, not in the same way there used to be. We've faced our worst fears and come out stronger on the other side. We've learned that life isn't about avoiding difficulty. It's about learning to embrace it, to grow through it, and to come out the other side better than before. And as I look ahead to the future, I see it not with fear, but with hope. Hope for the next chapter, for the next opportunity, and for the next adventure. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the stars, I reflected on how much we had changed over the years. Our lives weren't defined by the mistakes of the past, but by the resilience we had shown in the face of those challenges. It had taken time, effort, and a great deal of patience, but we had finally reached a place of true peace. It wasn't that we no longer felt the sting of the past. Rather, we had learned to view it differently. The foreclosure, the hidden debts, the secrets, all of it was a part of our story, but it no longer held us captive. Instead, it had become a chapter we had learned from, a chapter that had propelled us forward into the lives we were living now. I knew that reflection was important. It allowed me to recognize the progress we had made, to appreciate how far we'd come, and to ensure that we never took our present happiness for granted. Reflection gave me the ability to see the lessons in every difficult moment, and with that, I had found a new sense of gratitude. The future, I realized, was not something we had to fear. The road ahead wasn't a path free of obstacles. No life ever is, but it was a road we would walk together, with the wisdom of everything we had been through. We had learned that life wasn't about perfect planning or avoiding mistakes. It was about how we navigated the journey, how we held on to one another through the highs and lows. My husband and I no longer sought perfection. We had learned that imperfections were what made life real, beautiful, and meaningful. And the road ahead? We would continue to face it, not with fear, but with determination, with love, and with the quiet strength that comes from knowing that no matter what comes our way, we can handle it. As the days unfolded, we continued to pursue our new dreams, our small business, our travels, our moments of joy together. Each day was an opportunity to move closer to the life we had envisioned, one that was full of purpose, love, and most of all, hope. It felt almost poetic that after everything, we had come full circle. The struggle we faced had been a crucible, refining us, molding us into something we never expected to be. And yet, I could say now, looking at the life we had built, that it was more than enough. It was exactly what we had needed all along. We had learned to embrace the reality of imperfection and had found beauty in it. Our home, our family, our love, they were not born out of perfection, but out of a deep commitment to one another, to growth, and to the values we had chosen to prioritize. We had created a life not from material wealth or external validation, but from the strength of our bond and the resilience we had cultivated through our struggles. And in the end, it was the life we were proud to live, the life we had built together. A life that felt right, authentic, meaningful, and filled with love. The final piece of the puzzle for me was learning how to truly let go. We had rebuilt our lives, our trust, and our future, but I had spent so much of that time holding on to the past, replaying the same hurt and resentment. It was time to release that grip, to let go of the anger, the hurt, the lingering doubts. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean that the scars weren't there. It meant acknowledging that they were a part of the story, but no longer letting them control the narrative. I was free to move forward without the chains of old wounds holding me back. Letting go opened space for something new. Hope, joy, and a renewed sense of trust in the present moment. With that release, I felt lighter. I could breathe again. I could truly embrace the life we had worked so hard to build, without being weighed down by what had come before. The beauty of life, I've come to realize, is that no matter how far down the wrong path you may go, you can always find a way back. That's the gift of a new beginning. It's never too late to rewrite the story, to shift the narrative, to create something new. Looking back, I could see that every step, every tear, every moment of doubt had led us to where we were now. And I wouldn't trade a single part of it, because it had shaped us into the people we were today, the people we were meant to become. And as we stood on the threshold of a new chapter, I knew that this was only the beginning of the rest of our lives. We had learned how to rise from the ashes of our past, and now we were ready to embrace whatever came next, together. If there was one thing I knew for certain, it was this: we were stronger together. The struggles we had faced, the challenges we had overcome, had only served to deepen our bond. And now, more than ever, I understood that there was nothing we couldn't face as long as we had each other. Through the worst of times, we had held on, and through the best of times, we had thrived. It was our love that had carried us, and it was our love that would continue to guide us through the years ahead. And so, as we walked into the future, hand in hand, I knew one thing. No matter what came next, we would face it together. We were unbreakable, not because we were perfect, but because we had learned how to rise, how to love, and how to never give up on one another. We were home, and we were ready for the journey that awaited. The journey we had taken, filled with heartache, growth, forgiveness, and hope, had shaped us into a family that knew what really mattered. The mistakes of the past had been left behind, replaced with a newfound appreciation for love, honesty, and resilience. Our story was one of redemption, of rising above, and of finding strength in the most unexpected places. And as I sit here today, looking at the life we've created, I know this is just the beginning of the next chapter. No matter where life leads us, we are prepared to meet it together. We've learned the value of trust, forgiveness, and love, and now, we are ready to write a new story, one filled with purpose, peace, and the unwavering certainty that together, there is nothing we cannot overcome. Our story may have started in the shadows, but it ends in the light, and I wouldn't have it any other way.